We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき成長する。
We grow
when we give. Welcome to ROG, Return on Generosity. I'm your host, Shannon Cassidy. This podcast celebrates generosity at work, not financial giving valuable time, mutual respect, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration. Our special guest today is Dave Delaney. Dave is obsessed with how we can be nicer and how we communicate both online and in person. He's the founder of futureforth.com and creator of the NICE method, which is used to help leaders of fast-growing companies retain talent, improve communication, and culture. Dave's an author, a keynote speaker, and a thought leader. What I appreciate most about you, Dave, is your levity and generous communication style. You create safe spaces for people to share in a meaningful way. And I'm so grateful that you're here with us. Welcome to ROG, Dave.
Yeah, thanks a million for having me, Shannon. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you. Yeah, your podcast is a lot like this podcast, where I believe that you give people a sense of hope that there's great leadership in the world and there's some practical things that people do that demonstrate great or nice or generous leadership. So I'd love for you to share with us a little bit of the NICE method and, the thought leadership behind it.
Yeah. And first of all, I should mention too that I have what I call my mini ebook version of the keynote presentation that I do called the NICE method, which is available for your listeners for free, for the next little while anyway. So they can visit nicemethod.us or nicemethod.us, depending how you want to spell it. I like us.
Yeah.
It's so on brand. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you can use the coupon ROG on that page to get the book for free. I think it's like
I love that. And that'll be in the show notes. Thank you for that generosity.
Yeah. So the NICE method is a methodology I came up with to help leaders of fast-growing companies improve retention and communication and culture. On average, it costs between 6 to 9 months, according to SHRM, 6 to 9 months someone's salary to replace that person if they quit. Which is daunting. When you think about it, like a $60,000 employee costs between $30,000 to $45,000 to replace. And then multiply that by more people who might leave as a result of that person leaving, what we call turnover contagion. And these things happen because communication is poor or miscommunication takes place at work where, so what I do is I work with leaders to improve how they communicate in order to have and lead happier, more connected teams and ultimately retain talent. And I use the NICE method framework in order to achieve that. And I do it through consulting, but I also do it through keynote presentations and through corporate workshops and training as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I've really enjoyed watching your work and learning from you through your podcast and your YouTube and all of the ways that you so generously share this thought leadership. And your model is also really interesting, including that you have that calculator to figure out how much it costs for turnover. So you're right, it's astounding, isn't it?
It's crazy. I mean, I created the calculator, which your listeners can find at futureforth.com to try the calculator. It's right on the homepage. There's no email capture or anything. You can just use it. But I created it in part because I'm terrible at math. And I remember the statistic, $60,000 employee costs $30,000 to $45,000 to replace. But after that, I'm like, $123,000 employee. I'm like, I'm not very good at math. So I created that calculator just so you can punch in a salary and right away get a feel for exactly how much it will, or approximately how much it will cost. And it's built off the Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM's calculations from their own studies. So.
Thank you. And thanks for explaining that acronym, SHRM. So how can we improve our communication so that we reduce all of this cost? What are some of the recommendations that you have for leaders and organizations to reduce the cost of turnover?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to actively listen and to really focus on hearing your team. So the three kind of pillars within the NICE method are to hear your team, to avoid the wrecks, and then life outside the walls. And so to hear your team, it means to, actually listen to your team, but also make them feel empowered by responding and also providing feedback and recognition to team members who are doing a great job. Avoiding the wrecks means avoiding miscommunication and also workplace fear. Sometimes fear of management results in mass exodus as a result of some of that mismanagement. And then life outside the walls means finding ways to build and foster friendship at work and to do so. And also while supporting your local community and the world at large through philanthropy as well. And these activities, both from philanthropy, but also just fun activities, can bring your team together, both within the walls, but also outside of the walls of the organization. And so I use examples of that in the book that I mentioned, the NICE method, but also in the presentations and training I do. So really, ultimately, you're using sort of these methodologies to ultimately improve the way you lead. But ultimately, also, it helps your team. And part of the backstory of coming up with the NICE method was I worked for great bosses. First of all, I will say I've been very blessed to work for great people. However, I've also worked for some that were not as great, and one in particular who was quite terrible. Who will remain nameless. But I bring that up because as a result of this experience with this certain people, I felt terrible. It was a terrible ordeal at work. I was stressed. I was scared for my family because I didn't know whether I was going to be laid off or fired. I wasn't really sure what was happening. And I was having a heck of a time trying to get any clear answers. And it was like, it became this real toxic workplace. And so part of this thinking is that if I can teach leaders to be better people and nicer people, not only is it going to save the company money having to replace and retrain people, but it's also going to build strong reputations, and it's going to make the team enjoy coming to work, whether that's in person or hybrid or distributed.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you learned not to do because of this boss that you're referring to?
Well, I mean, one thing not to do is, the flip side is to be transparent and not to, ridicule a team member, if you're having problems or challenges with that person, but rather having a coffee, having lunch, buying them lunch and sitting down and reviewing, how things are going. And this isn't necessarily in that kind of scenario as well. I mean, you can also do this as part of a stay interview, which is something I encourage my clients to do. Yeah.
I'd love for you to share more about that, Dave. The stay interview concept is brilliant. And you have these three key questions that you recommend everybody ask during these stay interviews. So please share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So stay interviews basically happen when you are, well, first of all, you should be doing it with your top talent, first of all. So start with your top talent and then you can go down the line. But the goal here is to really ultimately have an intimate, casual conversation. Let them know, hey, I just wanted to spend maybe 20 minutes with you, just have a quick chat. Is that okay? And let them know that don't worry, there's nothing to panic about, because when the boss says that, sometimes it's a little worrying. But these questions that you ask will help to ease that person, to make them feel comfortable, but also for you to get a feel for how the experience is working for you. Oftentimes people, we've heard this term quiet quitting quite a lot over the last year or two. And, it only has a name now, but we've all been there working, and just checking out and just not interested in working wherever we're working anymore. So as a way to prevent quiet quitting from taking place, you need to check in with your team members to see how they're doing. And so a lot of times companies do exit interviews when somebody has quit and they're leaving. And so you do an exit interview to find out, why they're leaving and, what you could have done better and things. But I would argue that it's way better off You're way better off doing a stay interview with your top talent on a positive note, just to find out how things are going. So the first question is, what do you like least about working here? And again, this is a one-on-one conversation. It's closed door, over coffee, casual. Keep it casual. But what do you like least about working here? I know you love working here, but what are some things that you don't like about working here, or some things that you know that maybe irk you? The second question is, what do you like most about working here? And what keeps you here? I know it's a scary question to ask, but what keeps you here? What makes you stay working for us? And what do you like most about it? And then the third, I know that's two questions, but the third question is, what might tempt you to leave? So again, you're just trying to get a feel for where their head's at. And that might, they might say, well, I might be tempted to leave if I was offered, better benefits or more money or something like that, or to be able to work from home, an additional day each week. And just by opening up, especially with your top talent, just by opening up this dialogue, you could learn that they might be a little frustrated. They might want that extra day off each week, or to work from home each week. And that gives you the opportunity to fix that problem before that person starts the quiet quitting process and ultimately leaves your company.
Yeah.
And that ends up costing money. So stay interview questions are important.
Love that. So for the clients that you have been suggesting this practice to, and they've been having these interviews, is there anything that they're learning from their top talent that has been almost insurmountable? Or are you finding that they're really telling you some pretty basic things that are quick wins?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, and I've written about this in some of the workshops I do on my website on FutureForth, but 62% of employees with 1 to 5 work friends said they would reject a job offer elsewhere. So that is a big number. And that's something that people find sometimes working for companies, is they feel kind of lonely. They don't really know people, or they haven't been onboarded well when they started at that job. And so I've discovered some of those findings, and just hearing some of this feedback from leaders after having these conversations, that, they would love it if it wasn't just all work all the time. Like they could let their hair down a little and have some fun, and get to know their colleagues more. This is why companies hire me to come and do retreats and speaking at like offsites and things like that. So when I do like private engagements, I get the group really engaged and laughing and having a good time. But this gives them, I teach them, but I also give them a lot of things that they can do to improve the way they communicate. But we do it in a fun way, so that way it becomes a memorable experience. So that's also some feedback I've heard about.
You've heard that it's fun?
Yeah, well, they're looking for fun. They want it to be fun. They don't want it to be just boring. When it's all work and no play, well, also a lot of people now are looking for more opportunities. Well, actually, it's interesting. People are looking for opportunities to work from home more often in a hybrid sort of model, but a lot of people are lonely. A lot of people actually want to go back to work and go back to the office. So it's having these conversations and discovering what, different people feel.
Yeah. So when you talked about the NICE methodology, you talked about the 3 things: the hear your team, avoid the wrecks, life outside the walls.
Yeah.
So for the hear your team, what would be some of the strategies or recommendations that you have for leaders who are listening, who really want to improve in this pillar?
Yeah. One of the things, it's funny because I get so many heads nodding when I do this in person, when I speak and talk about this one thing. Go analog, buy some thank you cards. And every Monday, start your work week by writing a thank you card, like old school, pen and paper. Write them a thank you card and mail it to their home. And don't just write, hey, thanks a lot. But fill it out and let them be specific and let them know why you are thankful to have them on the team. A card nowadays is like old school analog card is the coolest surprise. And I'm not talking about like stuffing it with a Starbucks gift card or anything like that. just a simple thank you card from the heart. What happens here, though, is not only is it received with love and just, wow, I can't believe I just got this. So the team member feels great about it. But guess what? You feel better about it too as you write the card. And what happens is, first of all, if you do it first thing every Monday, you start the week off on a really positive note. But before you turn on your computer, before you start checking your email in the day, dedicate like Monday mornings to writing one card to one person on your team. And it just starts the tone of the week off really well. But it also puts things in perspective for you to realize how lucky you are to have team members who are awesome. And so, and if you can't think of somebody, then you're not paying enough attention. So that's also an important point.
That's a great one. Thank you. So practical.
Yeah.
And so the second piece is avoid the wrecks.
Yes.
And what you have in there is repetition, setting standards, and being available.
Yeah.
What could you teach us about that? What's something we can practice?
Yeah, one of the things I stole from Adam Grant, actually, from his, I think it was from Think Again, which is an amazing book.
Love it.
Yeah, I believe it was in that book where he talked about Ask Me Anything coffees, AMA coffees. And I am a big proponent of this. So what you do is, as a leader, is you block time on your calendar each week, whether you can, some people can't do it daily, but at least at least for an hour or a week, preferably more, but scheduling, and making it like 4 15-minute chunks or 2 30-minute chunks in an hour, let's say, and call it your Ask Me Anything coffee. And this is an open invitation for any team member to come and sit down with you, have a coffee, and just ask you anything, within reason, of course, about work, preferably. But this gives team members the opportunity. So have you ever worked for someone and you didn't know, you worked with them for so long that you didn't know the answer to something that you really should have known at that point? This happens.
Yeah. And
you feel so embarrassed because you're like, I can't ask now. So it's almost like a George Costanza Seinfeld thing, like going to work and not knowing, God, I don't even know,
yeah, I should know this.
Right. So
who else would know this?
Yeah, right. Somebody save me. So the idea of the Ask Me Anything coffee is just that. You can come and ask the most silly question and you're not going to be judged. It's judgment free. And come and just ask the question, whatever it is, or questions that you have that you probably should know the answer to, but you, for whatever reason, don't. Because this gives people permission and empowers your team members to feel brave enough to come and talk to you, first of all. And you can laugh about how silly it is that they don't know it in a good, positive way. But most importantly, they get the answers and the information that they actually need. And it also provides, it also avoids the wrecks from taking place, like, when that person doesn't know that they were supposed to do that thing and suddenly you're being audited. And
that's such great advice.
Thank you.
So avoiding the wrecks is like that, being available, listening, like giving them consistency. I think you said earlier, being transparent is something you learned from that boss in the past.
Yep.
The repetition. Tell me more about repetition.
Repetition. So I go into the training. I talk about an acronym for LISTEN. And T in the word listen stands for test your understanding. And what that means is repeating the information that you receive so that you retain the information, you actually remember it. So for example, if you're walking down the hall and somebody stops you and says, "Hey, I need you to ship this package to our New York office by 9 a.m. Monday morning. It's got to be there by 9 a.m. Monday morning." You say, "So what you're saying is," and you begin. "So what you're saying is this package, New York, in our New York office, 9 a.m. Eastern, I assume, Monday morning. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?" And by using those two phrases, so what you're saying is, and is that what you're saying, you're allowing the person to clarify any misunderstandings and vice versa. So what happens is they feel really confident in you because you've just repeated it and like, okay, yeah, Dave knows. Dave's got the information. I feel good. Dave's good. He's good to go. So just by repeating it, it makes that person feel heard. And it's helpful with customers. It's helpful with colleagues. I mean, this works. It helps with my wife. Trust me. So the kids need to be at so-and-so by whatever time.
Is that what you're saying?
Is that what you're saying? Exactly. Exactly. So repeating it out loud. The other thing that happens, and I wish I was a neurologist. I really love neurology and listening to the podcasts of all these really smart people. So I can't scientifically talk about what happens in your head, but I do know that your brain perks up when you repeat the information verbally. When you repeat the information out loud, it does help you retain that information. And so you actually remember that information. So if you're in the office, you're walking down the hall, your boss stops you and says, "Hey, we need this thing at 9 a.m. Monday morning in our New York office." And I go, "Okay." And I go back to my desk and I sit down and I look at my inbox and I look at Slack and I'm like, squirrel. And I've completely forgotten what I was supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
So just by repeating it out loud, your brain perks up and thinks, oh, this might be something important. And it does ultimately help you remember it. I wrote a book a few years ago called New Business Networking, all about growing your business and career networking effectively. And I talked about, how to remember people's names when you're networking an event. And again, that's the same sort of theory, right? You just repeat their name several times out loud in order for you to help remember that name. So that's another tip and how that can be used.
So smart. Get it in the brain, right? Say it while it's fresh. And then also maybe you did not hear him correctly. So
that's it.
Saying it in your own words, and then they can say, "No, I didn't say Monday."
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is a big deal. Like, it's a huge deal because that avoids the wrecks of miscommunication that takes place as a result. So it's important.
So practical, right?
Yeah.
But these are the little things that we're just not doing frequently or consistently.
Yeah.
So the third pillar of your framework here, your NICE method, is life outside the walls. And there you talk about building trust, the external and the internal.
Yeah. So, like, for example, actually, I love this case study, this example of celebrating sort of life outside the walls is actually, and from the internal perspective, literally using a wall. So I had one former client who created a bookshelf in his office. And so his entire wall was a bookshelf, which was great. And it was mainly nonfiction, business type marketing books and so on. But what he did is he took it a step further and he paid his team members to read those books. So suddenly he's paying them to read. And so what's happening as a result of this is they're being rewarded by reading these books. They're talking about the books during the meeting. So they have like a point to talk about. They're sharing their insights they learned from the book with their colleagues who might run with one of those ideas, or they may also use those ideas that they've learned from the book. And this is a friend now, Arnie Malham, from a former client, CJ Advertising, who went on to start his own business called Better Book Club. And so he sold CJ Advertising that was acquired. And now he started a startup all about Better Book Club, like helping team members and paying them to read and giving them a leaderboard and things like that to see who's reading the most. But again, it's just a great way of being a great boss and inspiring your team members to learn. And so, getting outside of the walls, though, you could just simply send your team members to a conference. Some of the best relationships I have over the years and friendships came as a result of attending conferences. And that's where, and I have an online course called betterconferencenetworking.com. Yeah. And for that, it's all about, not just, it's about going to conferences, but having a goal in place when you go. And it's also about following up after meeting new people. And so I've established some really wonderful professional relationships, both where I was able to use these new relationships, not use, but be able to use the brands that these new relationships represented and team up with them in order to build promotions and kind of co-branded in-kind promotions and things like that. So everybody wins. So I've done stuff over the years with Groupon and Wired Magazine and a whole bunch of others when I was working with a certain tech company. So yeah.
Oh, that's so neat. So your advice is to enter these engagements, these conferences, these experiences with an intention or like with a thoughtful outcome, like what you want to accomplish or how you want to be also.
Yeah. And it helps with SMART goals too. So that way you're setting actual goals to measure the results. So you really know whether you can measure the return on investment and generosity of being sent to a conference in the first place. I know people who have gone to conference. I've met them at conferences who were sent to the conference, but they had no idea why. They're like, I don't know, my boss bought the ticket and just told me to come. So here I am. I'm like, okay. Right. So what's your plan? Let's go get a beer. So that's important too. But it really does, like when you send your team members to conferences, and as a speaker myself, I absolutely love conferences. I love how communal they are. A lot of conferences to me are like summer camp. But you meet new people and great things come as a result of that. So investing in your team. Also, when you send your team out together to let's say a conference or a trade show, they have downtime together and they have dinners together and so forth, and they build relationships and become friends. And as I mentioned earlier, if you can foster friendship in your team, they're way less likely to quit as well. So it's kind of, again, it's a win-win all around by just being a nicer leader.
For sure. So you've written about and you speak about networking for nice people.
Yes.
And you've even talked about networking for nice people with LinkedIn. So I'd love to hear some of your techniques or the ways in which you recommend people are more generous and nice on LinkedIn.
So over the time, what I've learned, from using LinkedIn is it's not just a place to, find work, find a job, but it's a place where you can build genuine relationships and connect and share and become a thought leader in your own right. And so there's a lot to be said for LinkedIn. So beyond making your profile look great, and I have my own ways to do that, which I'm happy to share with your listeners offline if they want to reach out. But besides looking great, you can use LinkedIn to find connections. Like let's say you want to do business with a company. What's a company just off the top of your head? DuPont. Great. So let's say you have an opportunity to do some business for DuPont, or you have an idea for somebody at DuPont. Well, the first thing you would do is look up DuPont's company page on LinkedIn. And then you would click to see all employees. Now, DuPont's a big company, but this might take a minute. But you go through their directory and you look through and find the point person that you should talk to by their job title. So let's say it's the CMO of DuPont that you want to talk to because you have a marketing idea. So you find who that person is, and then you notice on LinkedIn whether you are a first, second, or third connection to that person. And for those who don't use LinkedIn that often, first connection means that we are already connected. So we presumably know one another already. The second connection is that I know somebody, one of my connections knows this person and is presumably connected to that person. Or third connection means that I don't know anybody who is connected to this person and I'm not either. So let's say Shannon is connected to Mary at DuPont. And so, and Shannon and I are first connections. So I would see, I would know who it is that I need to connect with. I could just try to reach out to her, but good luck with that. Instead, I could reach out to Shannon and say, hey, Shannon, I have this great idea for DuPont. Oh, man, I would love to talk to them about this crazy idea I have. And I noticed that you're connected to their CMO, Mary. I noticed on LinkedIn. Would you please provide me with an introduction? I would be eternally grateful. I just would love to get to talk to them to see if I'm a good fit for this, for whatever it is. And because you and I are connected on LinkedIn, and we hopefully know one another, which is another story, but you should accept connection requests from people you know. You could say, oh yeah, for sure, Dave, no problem. And then you would facilitate that introduction. Now I go into like far more detail about how to do this and do it effectively. For example, if I really want to do it and I want to do it sort of urgently, I would pick up the phone and call you, or I would email you rather than do it through LinkedIn, because maybe you're not on LinkedIn that often. So then you would provide the introduction through email, and that way I could pick up the conversation from there. Now, Mary's way more likely to accept an introduction through her friend Shannon than she is if I just cold reached out to her.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue, right. So this gets into the idea in my book, New Business Networking, about, I have a whole chapter on LinkedIn in the book about, and conferences and things like that too. But the point here is that you are trying to build relationships. And so taking a step further, or a step away from the example I just gave you, for me to connect with you on LinkedIn, I would send you a connection request, but say, hey, Shannon, it was so great to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to connect on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to provide you with an introduction to someone in my network should you need one. So right there in that request, I'm not just saying, hey, Shannon, let's connect on LinkedIn. But I'm saying, here's some value for you. Here's a good reason why you should accept my connection request. And you're like, well, Dave's got a pretty big network. He's even spoken for LinkedIn. So yeah, maybe I should accept his connection request. But whatever the case may be. So right away, and then what I could do is, by following you on LinkedIn, I could look at the content you're sharing, maybe reach out to you and say, hey, I saw, I know a media, like a radio person who's looking to interview somebody who's an expert on XYZ. And, I thought I should reach out to see if that's something of interest and I can connect you. So you're basically planting seeds. And you're trying to be nice. And so these nice seeds then foster those relationships. And ultimately networking, it's like, call it karma, call it what you want. But if you do it the right way, then it leads you to great places. Yeah.
So true. So at the end of every episode, we recap what individuals can do to apply what they've learned to their own work and lives. So we call it the ROG takeaway tip.
Yes.
So here's a couple that I've got. So if I heard what you're saying, is number one, to conduct stay interviews in the way that you just taught us how. 2, write thank you cards, handwritten thank you notes and cards. 3 is have the AMA coffees, the Ask Me Anything coffees. Make yourself available for those kinds of open conversations. And then the 4th thing was to repeat the instructions that somebody has given you so that you verify that you have heard them correctly by saying things like what you're saying is and what I think you're saying is, if I heard that correctly. So you're validating and you're repeating so that you're remembering, but you're also making sure that you got it right.
Correct. Yeah.
Anything else you would add?
No, I think that was great. I think you did a good job recapping there.
Well, thank you, Dave, for investing your invaluable time with us and for sharing so many practical tools for how we can be nice and generous out in the workplace.
Yeah, my pleasure, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to ROG, Return on Generosity Podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.